So, dude, thinking about all the things we've talked about so far today, and so you were kind of saying...
several seasons.
You were talking about like the idea of psychedelics helping you open your mind. But so that it was to a point that it opened your mind, right? But as you look back now and go, like, what could you say about, like, what did that do for you and what did it not do for you?
You couldn't have asked a better question because this could be a complete episode. So it whatever would have happened to me during that time period would have had the same effect. It did not have to be drugs. Now, drugs probably helped because I find what I was looking for? But yeah, I mean, it's like self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Would I have found the same thing hiking on the AT? Probably. Would I have found the same thing skateboarding? Maybe. But I found the most intense, what I was looking for in moments of sort of a meditative, they're already in me, right? So, like, maybe the story, like I see now that pot is legal. It's like all I would have wanted for 10 years of my life. Because 10 years of my life, all day, every day, woke up, got high all day, got high before bed, woke up, repeat. 10 years!
And not that it matters, but how old were you?
Like 16 to 26.
And actually, in that time, married and have kids.
Right? No. I got clean. Okay. Right before I went to grad school. I got to take my life more seriously.
Okay.
Maybe I'm addicted to this stuff. I'm going to quit pot. And that's when the emetophobia and the anxiety started. So I look back and I go, no, this was all looking for love in all the wrong places, right? I was wrong. It worked, but not to that degree. It gave pros and cons, like if I had to weigh it, it worked, yes.
Okay.
But it gave me so much baggage that I had to spend so much time undoing. And I look today, hopefully will sum the story up. Pot's legal now. You think this would be a wonderful thing. I think it's a terrible thing to take. Not terrible, but I look around and I go, no, man, no. So many people are trying to solve a problem, and they're convinced that it is solving a problem.
Yeah.
That it isn't. It's just, it's masking it, right? If I had not have ever stopped smoking weed, maybe I never would have gotten anxiety, right? But at some point I was going to have to stop.
Right.
Whether it was for kids or because of some health issues or whatever, and then that anxiety would have hit me like an even bigger freight train. I'm convinced. So
yeah.
Hopefully that sums up my position.
Yeah, it reminds me just of I'm not the first to say this, but every action is an act of love or a call for love.
Yeah, right.
And that's what you just said, looking for love in all the wrong places. Like,
yeah, I was right.
Can we put the song in this?
Yeah, no, we can't. Not on YouTube.
Right.
If I and change the words.
Right, yeah. So, right. So that's right. So every act is so that's exactly what you were doing. Like, what you wanted was love that, of course, I mean, how do we define that? But there's the state of love, which I think, and we'll get into this, is like what you're calling calm a lot in your episodes. Calm. And I call like inner peace or peace.
But it is love. I mean, it all.
And it's all, all can fall under love, on that. And okay, so you're smoking pot every day. You're looking for that. And now you look back and realize that you were looking for love in all the wrong places.
I was looking for self-validation of my love for myself. And this is on that subject, so I've told my therapist this multiple times, and one woman who I interviewed on my podcast, Stephanie Mitchell, she explained it to me that I love myself definitively within my own luminous egg of a self, whatever that means. You use some other word to describe it, but like whatever we are as a separate entity, the individualistic part of our existence. We can talk about that later too. I'm cool with that. It's when my world starts to bump into the rest of the world, the other part of the yin and yang of being human, the community part, then I go, well, I don't know if they love me. And so in the context of the world, do I love myself? That was my struggle. So I was looking for validation in weed to sort of make that go away. Like I feel good like this. And so it was more of an isolation mechanism, right? It became a part of my personality and my identity that I could use to avoid dealing with people. If I was high in my interactions with everybody, then that created an excuse for anything that went wrong.
So was that like...
Or right.
So my brother uses the term... we've talked about it in terms of like people that ultimately commit suicide or think about suicide. But and I think this goes true in jobs also, right? Is people have like escape fantasies.
Yeah, right.
So I think earlier you used the word like escapism, right? Which is, I've never really thought of it like that. Is that an actual word? But if not, it should be.
Yeah.
Like escapism.
Yeah, it's what people want to avoid the problems of life.
And that's what you were actually doing, is you were seeking to escape from this daily
struggle of love.
The struggle.
I mean, but of trying to figure out what was going on. Now I can look back and say, yeah, I had created a private world for myself that was all great, but then when I tried to integrate that with the rest of the world, either getting a job or having friends or going to school or whatever, putting yourself out there, that's when the struggle was created. Yeah. And what Stephanie Mitchell said is, she's like, well, that's a typical response to a childhood of emotional neglect. Yeah. Nobody did anything wrong. You just, for whatever reason, couldn't figure out how to get your emotional needs met. So you create what I call a terabithia, a private world for yourself. Yeah. Where everything's awesome. And it was. I mean, I'm arrogant, maybe even a little narcissistic in that luminous bubble. But that's tempered by my interaction with the rest of the world. And it reminds me that, oh yeah, okay. I'm not, so, God. Dude,
did having kids make it where that was a definitive moment in growth for you then? Because shortly after, so you're smoking weed every day for 10 years, go to grad school.
Yeah, and then in grad school start having kids. So it's a couple year period where this like overlaps. No, I mean, it's funny. My life definitively changed. I had a spiritual moment when my first kid was born, but it also took whatever was happening with me getting off weed and the emetophobia, it multiplied that by like orders of magnitude. Okay. And that's when my wife at the time was like, I think you need some help, like what's wrong? And so I went to the doctor and explained about the emetophobia. They put me on antidepressants. Okay. So I mean, having a kid, while it was awesome and spiritual and everything else, now it brought in a severe piece of the rest of the world that I had to deal with, because of grandparents and childcare and school, and now I'm part of it. I can't just isolate.
Right, you can't just go to Terabithia.
Right.
You have
or I could bring them with me, but that's doing them a disservice. I felt that responsibility to sort of, I'm not going to...
Dude, what was the spiritual moment with the kid when your first child was born? How would you... Can you define? Can you explain that?
About me?
Yeah. No.
Okay, so how when you meet your girlfriend and you fall in love, right? It's this process, and then one day you kind of realize, maybe little bits. You're like, I love this person. You just sort of go through a process. It's like gradualism versus punctuated equilibrium. Okay. When I saw, the first thing that happened, which was really strange as a biologist, I did not expect her to have hair. So, you don't look at a vagina in this way ever. It's like, you try to not see it like that, and it's weird, and it's kind of creepy, and then you reach a moment where it's like, oh, okay, this doesn't have anything to do with sex. This is something completely different, and whatever. So it looked like a different being on the table, right? Not even like a woman. Yeah. And then all of a sudden I see the head crown, and it's hairy, but I didn't know it was hair. And so I thought, it's alien. I mean, I don't know what I thought. Right. I don't know. It was like I was ripped out of the reality that I knew, right? I was ripped out of it and was like, this is almost like what you want in a psychedelic experience. Here's a whole nother reality, man, that you had no idea existed. Boom. And then eventually I figured out it was her head, and I watched her come out. And then what happened was that process of loving somebody that you do, like with your parents, you have parental love, but it was always there. You don't know, you don't remember how that happened. Right. This went boom, and it was I loved this thing. Right. In the same kind of way, maybe even a little more intense, but like getting hit by a truck, like it just happened instantly. So that was and there's something spiritual to that. And I think I've had those moments since then about flowers, or the mind, right? Or somebody's love of God that I don't understand, that's so profound that I'm just like, boom. Yeah. That's love. And so when I discovered love in my adult life, that the only thing I have to reference is that moment. Right. Of like, okay.
Right. Well, and dude, it's interesting that you say like about like the flower or somebody else's love of God or, whatever it is, because it's like really, every moment is spiritual. If the mindset creates that, and I mean, one of my like favorite authors for a long time was Rob Bell. I don't know if we've talked about him, but he does a video called "Everything Is Spiritual," and it's really you would dig it
Totally.
because he starts with a big whiteboard and starts with the in the beginning, like from the Bible, but then takes it into science. And starts like connecting the two, so you can
it's
see
all
it.
The same.
Right. Yeah, trying to put it together. And of course, see, that was like, and I think the reason that resonates with me, and I think this is, part of why like our conversations are so cool, because you had such an expertise level, right, of the ecological side. But the
just stuff out of a book.
Yeah, well, but still, it's cool to hear it, like, because dude, I gotta admit, like, I don't. And I mean, I would not be able to explain it, but like evolution, like I get it, but I don't get it. And then one day you said, and you probably couldn't like repeat it verbatim right now, but I was like, oh, okay, now I understand.
Oh, that's the
better.
uniqueness imperative. That'll be a whole episode too. Yeah.
And, it helped me like understand it. But so for me, like right after college, I went, or at the end of college, I should say, I was student teaching at an environmental center that we did Earth Education, and that's where that goes with the knowledge plus experience. For you equaled wisdom. Those things, that was in that particular program, you earned 4 keys. We've talked about this before, but knowledge plus experience is the first 2 keys you earn. And then you earn the Y key, which stands for yourself, because you had to put the knowledge and experience into practice.
Integrate it,
right? Which is wisdom, right? Okay. And then...
I know, it's uncanny.
Yeah, and then you share it, right? So, dude, and that was just, like, so when you said knowledge plus experience equals wisdom, that instantly I was like, oh, I get this.
Well, and that's not insignificant, because it's like we both had the same training, just in a different way. Right. And that's I still don't fully appreciate the experience you had when you saw what I did and you went, I did this stuff already. Which is crazy, because I never was exposed to that specific stuff. But I sort of, again, with the gradualism, or now this is the convergent evolution. We all follow these different paths but end up in the same place. It's the same thing.
My brother said one time, we were talking about like different people's ideas of heaven or an afterlife. And, it would almost be like a joke, like whatever, a Christian, a Muslim, and a Hindu, all die and go to the afterlife, and are like, all like here, it's exactly like I said it would be. Like we all would say it. Right, like whatever. And maybe that should be like a Christian and agnostic or whatever combination. But it's like we're going to get there. And so, for me... That was, so we've talked about this actually already. In my book, I call it unavoidably pulled towards the one big whole, which again, just call that God, that's fine.
W-H-O-L-E.
Yeah, W-H-O-L-E, capital W.
We're not going to fall in a hole.
Right, and we're unavoidably pulled towards that. And I mean, for my money, we're going there whether...
Yeah, no matter what.
Because we're there already. Like, we're going there because we are there. Like, because we're in that. And, of course, that's like 50 episodes. And 50 arguments, right? Because people will say that there's only one way to go.
Yeah.
And to a degree, I agree. There is one way to go.
And we're all going there.
And that is to orient ourselves to the truth, right? Because that's where it's going. And of course, that's super complicated and into absolute truth.
But this is an important point that I just have only realized in the last week, is that I think in my most recent couple episodes of KEW, that we are not here to offer a one-sentence explanation. That's not the goal. Neither of us expects that. Right. And I think everybody has to be comfortable in the sort of, the discussion is the goal, right? It's that whole, it's not the destination, it's the journey.
Yeah.
We don't have the capacity to know the truth or what love is or what the path should look like. All we can know is that we trust that we're on it.
Yeah. Right.
And then we can talk about that in many different ways, and there's all kinds of different opinions, interpretations, and that's beautiful. There's never going to be like some agreement about
Well,
what that is.
And I think it's so important to realize that, so is you're going through this, it's a growth development, so it's a developmental hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, because we can think of hierarchies as negative quite quickly because of a dominator hierarchy.
The caste system.
Right, yeah. But so there would be, like, well, there's probably a lot of hierarchies, but, like, so there would be, like, developmental hierarchy, so you could say this great ecologically. I would just say, like, an example would be, like, letters to words to sentences to paragraphs, right? That's a developmental hierarchy. And then so it would be what, like atoms
to molecules to cells to tissues to organs to organisms to communities to populations
right.
to ecosystems.
It's a developmental hierarchy that has to happen. And then there would be dominator hierarchies. That would be where most of the negative things are, where it's going to be a power control issue thing. But there's also, like, structural hierarchy. So the military would be a great example of that, right? Is, because you would have, from general down to a private or whatever they are. And that's good. And I think there's places for that, right? But we all go through developmental hierarchies. So if you have actually developed to a higher level than somebody else, somehow that you realize that you cannot attack them. Because if you attack them, that you're not actually developed more than them.
You've explained this to me before, and it's
this is so hard because it's like it's not just going around and be like, well, I'm better than you. That's not it. It's like, okay, I see the world from, like, a more complete. It's not a right and a wrong. It's a more complete. Because really, so as somebody develops, somebody could actually pass you in development and go, like, man, like, you got me through here, and now I'm here. And,
what's wrong with you?
And you're not seeing it, but they wouldn't say what's wrong with you as they do it, because they know that you're just not there yet. You know what I mean? So it's not a matter of right or wrong. It's like it's a matter of growth. It's an incomplete growth. It's an incomplete understanding.
That's so awesome. And what I hear is it's dynamic. That's like, we don't expect all of a sudden. The end goal is not, we're going to do this every week, and then 6 weeks, everybody that watched this we're all going to be enlightened, and we're all going to be at whatever the top level is. That's not the goal. The world has to be comprised of people at all levels in dynamism, because then it's like, without Luke Skywalker, there's no Darth Vader. Without Darth Vader, there's no Luke Skywalker. You have to have people at all levels all the time to teach us exactly what you're saying. And to me, that's love. And to learn to not go, oh, you're so below me because you still think that littering is okay or whatever. Right. That's not. Yeah, you would automatically be like bumped back down to whatever prior level you were on. And because then you become the same thing. It's just the opposite side. You haven't learned the lesson. And so, I mean, God, this is a whole 10 episodes. But so this is a problem where like feminism can there's tons of principles about feminism that are true, right? And like, I would probably identify myself as a feminist for lots of reasons. Right. But that, and again, I would tell you not to identify yourself as anything. But so I would agree with the principles of things. But the answer isn't to make, like, feminist the new problem, right? Like, we don't want that to become the dominator. We don't want it to become a dominator hierarchy, right? That's not the solution either. So we could give that, okay, maybe there is the patriarchy tends to be or is the dominator now, right? And a problem,
and all the ways that it is a problem are a problem.
Oh man,
but
right?
We don't just flip it, because that's not creating the solution either. Like, that flipping it is not creating the solution. It's the same thing. And oh my God! And so that's where you wouldn't attack somebody, right? If you are and so what you have, and this I think about this all the time, because people, the way we say things, and I'm sure somebody could pick something out of this video that we've talked and be like, well, totally. Like I can maybe find like a fault in this or
but that's what we said. It's dynamic.
Right, it's dynamic, and
change our minds.
We see in memes. So the whole social media thing has laid where I say that we do things that we are unknowingly divisive, right? We're not trying to, and needlessly divisive is usually the way I say it. Like, we're not trying to be divisive. We're trying to share this great, like, this aspect of our life that is good. Right. But because of words, and this goes back to, what we talked about with words, just that, like, a word becomes loaded. Like, so the word Christian can become so loaded. I've heard people say, like, well, because Christian's so loaded, I just say that I'm a follower of Christ, because they don't even want to be associated with that word Christian. Right. And so for me, honestly, it's like, like I went through a phase where maybe I didn't want to say the word God, because I didn't want to pigeonhole that avenue, and anybody that doesn't understand like God,
or whatever,
they only identify it as one thing, right, and not other things. And so I didn't want to say I had an aversion to words like that, or even like prayer, because prayer can be, I think there's value in prayer, but it's like when we just keep saying over and over, like thoughts and prayers and no solutions, well, that's not the answer either, right? So that word becomes loaded in that way. Yeah. But do I pray every day? You could call it that. There's an aspect of what I do every day in my daily practice that I do. And try not to just say thoughts and prayers. And it's because, like, what are we supposed to say on that? It's like somehow we want to help, but we don't know how.
Well, and what is our real intent? And this is one episode on intent. It's like, what do you actually mean? And I often do not have the right words to relay the intent of what I'm trying to say. I just don't. It hasn't been said before, to my knowledge. I've never read it before. And that's not an easy thing to do. And it's so easy to understand why we would screw it up all the time,
Right.
And why can't we just go... Well, one of the things, I've said this one time in my life, and I got it a lot when I was a stay-at-home dad. So part of my history is, I quit my professor job to raise the kids, which gave me this interesting gender reversal perspective. And people always used to say things like, your job's not really that hard, or you got it pretty easy because you don't have to work, and just things that were kind of insensitive, or even like, oh, look, it's mom's day out and dad's got the kids today. And somebody said something one time like, I don't remember what he said, but I said, I know you didn't mean for that to sound ugly, but it sounded really ugly the way you said it. Is that how you meant it?
Right.
And a guy that was standing next, listened to both of us, said, it actually did sound really ugly. What did you mean?
Yeah.
And that was one of those moments in life where I was like, wow, I could have just got really offended, blown up, ruminated about this for a long time, made it a part of my identity, attached to it, and fought against it, and who knows. But instead, I had a moment of clarity and let this guy... And it turns out he didn't mean at all like what I had insinuated. I was thinking he was insulting my dadness in some way.
Right.
He really wasn't. He was sort of... Funnily enough, he was actually sort of... What's the word? Where he was like, misery loves company. He was... commiserating with me. He was like, yeah, that's really hard, is kind of what he meant to say. What he came out is, you're a sucky dad.
Right.
Why can't we do that? We don't have that skill set. We don't learn that in school.
Yeah.
We don't learn how to have a conversation.
So, just for technical things, or maybe
I don't know what just happened.
Yeah.
Well, I was, being brilliant.
Right.
Nothing. I guess maybe after like an hour.
Maybe it just shuts down.
What is
yeah.
time?
Cool. Yeah. So we've been on for an hour.
So
all right. So, dude, I think we've touched on tons of areas where we're going with this show.
That's a pretty good introduction, huh?
I like it. So let's just maybe to kind of wrap up. And so, dude, a couple of our goals on this is just being like it's honest and just real. Like, this is just us. This is just our thoughts. This is where we've come to. This is where we're at right now. Is there room for growth for both of us? We both clearly think there is. So one of the things, just is like when you agonize over trying to do like, hey, we want to do this show. We're going to do a podcast. We're going to do YouTube videos.
Gotta make it perfect.
Right. You want it to be good. But so we've talked about a title. And right now, so you kind of had a cool little drawing. I don't know, maybe we can like show it on there. But it's like being better. And then with arrows kind of chasing each other, right? So being better becomes better being. So just kind of talk about that just for a minute of like what
Well, yeah,
I think that's kind of self-explanatory, but kind of what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, part of the intention of starting like this is to show you what it looks like under the hood, right? I'm so tired of like this over-preparedness of the world. And I love YouTube and podcasts. I mean, that's how I like to get information, and reading books. And books are kind of the same way, too. They're all filtered by these screens, and they're all kind of the same. But this is what really happens. So you and I going, what are we going to call this? And then there's like an infinite amount of ideas. And then one thing kind of sticks. And yeah, I said better being. And the idea was sort of like, what are we trying to do? Well, we're trying to be better. But that implies a lot because better is like a judgment. But the reason that we want to do that is so that we'll be better beings. And part of like my background with the indigenous culture is like, I look at evolution and thinking, millions of years and go, we got here. We're lucky enough and privileged enough to be able to gaze at our navels and go, why are we here? I mean, that's the dumbest thing, to be able to do, really, in the context of what all of our ancestors, including pre-human biological organisms, had to deal with, right? So I feel like we sort of owe it to our ancestors to be better. And maybe in like 100 years or 1,000 years or 10,000 years, we won't have climate problems and we won't fight so much and all that touchy-feely stuff.
Yeah.
So, and the idea that it's not just about being better as individuals, it's about being better as a community.
Right. And but by being better individually, and again, for what that's worth, maybe it's like maximizing your potential, which isn't a good name, right? But it's like
it could be the name of the show.
But being, maximizing your potential as a human, right? And there would be so many aspects of it because you could see maximizing it like physically. Like owning a gym, and of course I'm dealing with people like working out physically. Well, but there's do I reach my maximum potential physically? Well,
that's a good point.
I might have at one point, but that's not even a goal as my sole goal, right? Because it's like there's so many layers to what that means, like being better. It's the all-encompassing. My one friend says it like this. It's like we're going from a human animal to a spirit animal.
Yeah, like right? we're going from being a spiritual being in a human body. We're going from being human beings and I know what you're talking about. I missed it.
Yeah, so we're going from being we're in a human body. So the one guy calls it spirits in spacesuits.
Nice. Dude, this is a whole episode too.
Right, it's a whole episode. Think about this though. What does a spacesuit do for you? Like what an astronaut?
It's a life support system.
It's a life support system. So there's a suit that protects you from the outside elements.
It's a barrier, a boundary between you and it.
Right, and then in those spacesuits are self-contained air kind of things. Now. We are spirits in space.
No, it's right? Dude, don't get me started because we won't end for an hour, but this is one we'll come back to for sure.
Yeah. So, dude, I just think we have a lot. There's so many areas we can go. It would be it's so easy to think that it should be some sort of linear progression, but it's not. It's not a linear progression. It's almost it's the cycles and the spiral going up, which is almost like the DNA, right? The spiral of the DNA going up. And it's just so if we could, of all the things that have helped me grow as a person to the point I am now, if I could impart all of those on you simultaneously, right? I would love to do that, right?
Right, yeah.
But that's not the way the world works, because even though it's all happening simultaneously and spiraling on top of each other, we can only communicate in that linear fashion.
Oh man,
right?
that's beautiful.
And that's what we're a little bit limited to here. But to me, that's the goal of this, is we're going to try to put all these pieces together and then, have guests, which kind of right now we're thinking, leaning more towards local guests. What do the literal local population.
People.
Yeah, and maybe you don't, because you don't even know this person's in your neighborhood.
Right, yeah.
What do they do? Or maybe their job.
Well, and that's how, it goes back to how we met. We knew of each other, but we didn't really understand one another or have any idea that we would be such good friends.
Right.
And have So yeah, why do we need to listen to another podcast with Malcolm Gladwell or another podcast with Brett Weinstein? I've heard those guys; they're awesome. I've read their books, but what about regular people?
Right.
So yeah, that's a huge element of what we want to do.
And I think, like, you know, dude, it's important to me, like, because it's like you can kind of take. I'm not sure if Joe Rogan is going this way now, but what's the super big radio guy, Howard Stern?
Yeah.
Right. Howard Stern kind of has that edge to him.
It's
right?
Yeah, he's got a shtick.
It's right, and I don't really want to be that way. I don't want to, you know, be swearing all the time. Like, if we swear on this, we swear on it.
Yeah.
That's fine. Like, but it's not like that's our thing. Like,
no,
you know what I mean? Like, we're going to be swearing
cursing
and vulgar just for the sake of it. I don't want to be attacking somebody because it's like, to me, like, I want to understand them. Like, because again, they think they're right. They justify their actions in some way. So whether, and maybe somebody is definitively wrong. Okay, so like when we look through history, when we look back at somebody like Hitler, somebody like Stalin, we say that they were definitively wrong. But at the time, Hitler thought he was doing good things for the majority of nothing else, his people, if not, like, you know, more people in the world. Like, somehow he had come to that conclusion that he was doing the right thing for somebody. Mm-hmm. And only in hindsight can we see that. So now, somehow that's what we have to realize, where somebody, like, again, like what's going on in the world with, like, Ukraine and Russia, somehow Putin is justifying his actions as the leader of that country. Now, I mean, I don't think it's just him, of course. You know, there's a structure beneath him, right? But like
a bunch of enablers.
And maybe there's not, but like there's probably a structure beneath him. But I don't even think like his soldiers want that. Yeah. But he still thinks this is the vision, this is the way we should all go, right? And you know, so that's
well, and I think like that's a good one. If you and I did an episode on that, I think the way we would take it apart, not to like try to advertise the show within the show, would be different than what would be unique. And part of, I think, what we've talked about before and what you were getting at is that there's a million different ways to be on this path, and some of these are going to resonate with you and some of them aren't. And our hope is that, yeah, like you said, if we could, we'd go through the internet waves and change everybody and bring them up to our level or whatever, or figure it out even more and make them better than us, or help in whatever way people need us to help them. We would do that. Right. And we don't know what that is. So the only thing we can do, and we'll never figure it out, is just be what we are and hope that that matches up with some, you know, therapists I've talked to have said this, that 99% of a person's success in any kind of coaching or therapy is that they can pick up what this person is laying down. Like there's enough of an overlap of some, we'll call it magic or personality type or whatever it is, lines up and makes it effective. So some people out there are going to hear this 50 different ways and not get it. They might hear it from us, and they might get it. Right. And we would have the way that we want to give back or share or. So, and dude, like, it's like when you say things like, and me too, when we say things like, it's like we're trying to impart knowledge. It's like you've come to, like, you've really fleshed out like your specific values, right? To a degree, they change, but yeah. Yeah. And I don't necessarily think of it in those terms, but at the same time, like so for me, it became very specific that I wanted to live a life of integrity, right? And so integrity and integral, complete, those are all so similar, similar words, but but part of what that is just flat out acknowledging that you don't have like all the answers, and it's dynamic, and it's and you may never actually process, know, but right. Yeah, you want to try. Yeah. No, values is huge. I mean, we could do a whole episode on that. And I think a lot of what's wrong, what I would say is wrong, what was wrong with me is, again, I thought I understood. This is classic teaching. Kids come into the class, they go, Chapter 1, entropy. I know what that is. Yeah. First thing everybody says, how do you shoot a YouTube video? I don't know how to do that. It's kind of like we all think we're right. We think we know these things, and that puts like not resistance, but it modifies what happens next. We won't just say, I have this beginner's mind and actually learn something. It's like we have to go through this unlearning process first, and it makes, I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but it makes it difficult unless you're willing to sort of stop, try to make a concerted effort to stop doing that and just sort of admit that maybe I can take 15 minutes to listen to what these guys are saying and think about it. And I mean, in the perfect world, they'd be able to pick up the phone and call us, and we'd all have this like global conversation at the same time, so that we're all learning in the same way at the same speed and reminding each other that we don't really know. And again, I get to these points where it's like just this messy cluster of nothingness, but you have to be able to move through that.
Yeah.
It's what somebody called that. There's a angst. Like that's where the word angst came from. Is when you get into that point of, and we're going to hit that. Like this is what I realized on my podcast recently. We're going to hit moments of of angst where it seems like what's the point of doing any of this? But then you just keep going and you come out on the other side. Right.
Yeah. So, dude, I mean, I think, like, I feel like we've talked about a lot of things of where we want to talk about and what kind of brought us to this point. And I guess, I mean, like, a couple other things maybe that's worth saying here, and it would be like the first video, even if we don't release this as a first video, is that we've already talked about this a little bit, that we want this to be just like, you know, real and truthful, like all the time. This is just as real as it gets. Like, and it's messy, not as scripted. Like yeah, it's messy. And that, like, yeah, I mean, we have like a specific goal for this? Like we don't want to only make money for this. Like, that's not the goal, because we want to share the stuff. But like down the road, we might end up having a sponsor.
Yeah, let's be honest about it.
And we hope then that sponsor can go with us and share our values the best as possible. Mm-hmm. It's going to be identical, and because everything's so complicated, because that's even an episode to talk about. But so that we could, you know, we could have some sponsors. We could have that. Right now, we're calling Being Better, kind of with a little logo with the arrows.
The name may change.
The name may change, but none of that matters anyways. You're right. Is that it's still just going to be us talking, right? You know, to do it, and then we might end up like down, or even back to like the sponsor idea. Like, we could have a sponsor that then turns out it's like, oh man, we don't want them as a sponsor.
That wouldn't that be cool? I mean, just
to have that problem even.
Well, yeah,
yeah. So, you know, I think the biggest thing is, I mean, I just said it again, but it's that we're just real and truthful, and it's mostly spontaneous of what we're going to have some guidelines of where we go, and then we want to hear from people of like thoughts about specific, or what do you want to talk about, like, you know, because it's not that we want to tell you what to think, but to help everyone understand how to think about things.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
It's not what to think, it's how do you think about things, and what kind of tools can you use. And you mentioned like internal family systems, which I'm not familiar with, but that's something that's been super valuable for you.
Yeah, right. There's a ton of things.
And of course we could have, you know, other therapists on, or psychologists.
I thought about that. I've got another idea for a guest.
Talk about specific things like that.
Well, and that's the whole idea, right? Is that I don't know what I'm doing. Nobody knows what they're doing, but we all want something, and so every little bit, and this is our contribution to that public discourse,
right?
And there could be I think time and sponsors would be cool, but the coolest thing we could do was like on a podcast we listened to, Metaphysical Milkshake, where you actually have people leave messages and tell you or send you an email, and then actually maybe get in contact with them and have them spend some time talking about these things on air. I mean, I thought that was a brilliant way of sort of, because there's nothing worse as a teacher, and I'm not saying we're teachers in this, but I was, is standing up in front of the room and there's a one-way direction. Right. That sucks. Yeah. The best thing you can do in a classroom is make this.
Yep.
And it's hard to do.
Right, because we're all teachers and we're all students all the time.
Right.
No matter what.
That's right.
Right? Because
there is like no...
And so that was...
Erase the roles.
And that's, I mean, maybe that's where we even start the next episode, right? Is talking about like your actions are demonstrating what you truly are, right? So you're teaching, even if you don't realize you're teaching by the demonstration of your behavior.
That's
And
as a student, I teach or
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, that's
right. And then you're constantly a student and constantly able to learn too, because you might think that person that you don't like, right? You don't think of them as a teacher, but they are a teacher.
right.
You know?
They may be the best teacher.
Yeah, they might be the best teacher.
We hope you guys have enjoyed what we're doing. We hope you tune in next week. This has been Better Being.
And this has been Being Better.
That's right.
So, and let's talk just a little bit. Where can somebody reach you directly?
Right. Well, I'll have to put all that stuff in the show notes below, because we're going to be on YouTube. I have to start thinking in that sort of context, right?
Yep.
Where you can contact us via email, and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and everything will be housed on YouTube that you'll need. And who knows what will happen in the future, but for now, that's the plan.
So that's where we'll start out on YouTube. We'll have some notes of where to reach us in the show notes.
And check us out, or subscribe, because we'll have an episode coming out at least every week.
That's the plan.
Yeah, that's the plan, man.
All right. I like it. Good job.